Hello, it's a pleasure to see you. We've had some technical issues getting here, but finally we're here. Alison, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what you do, and why people would be interested in hearing from you, just as I am.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Alison French, and I am the founder and managing director of Alto Solutions, a small women owned consultancy based in the Washington, D.C. area. And my focus is on working with leaders, working with organizations and teams to help them become better leaders and better teams and organizations that work more closely together with empathy, with kindness, really doing this through consulting with them, but also facilitating sessions with them. I do a lot of leadership development, working with the leaders to help them improve. And I really like to do a lot of work also around sort of the neuroscience behind all of this, where, what is it that's going on in your brain that's driving you to do things the way that you do things, or that's maybe driving the people that you work with to do things the way that they're doing things. So it's always kind of fascinating to understand that, and that helps us to work better together. And I also do a lot of work with leaders around leading with kindness.
Nice. I like that. And especially as we originally connected, I believe was via the neuroscience route. I'm
Yes.
all about neuroscience. It's one of my great loves. So the next question came out of some of the previous interviews, and it's the most obvious one that I didn't think of, and that was, what question or questions do you think we should be asking ourselves about transforming workplace culture and leadership?
Oh my goodness. That's a tough one because transforming workplace culture is multi-layered.
Hmm.
So I think it's really, when you think about transforming culture, you want to think about what that end zone is for you, what that ending spot is, and where you want to end up. I think all too often we jump right in and try to change things, but we don't really have a clear view of where we're going. So I think, and I do this as well with any training session, any facilitated session that I do. It's, what's your desired outcome? What do you want out of this? Whether it's improving your leadership, what do you want out of this? What do you want out of your organization? What kind of culture do you want? And it sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how many people just kind of jump in without thinking about what are we shooting for? What are we aiming for?
Yeah. I really enjoy that because that's the case in a lot of the work I do. And even just as an English teacher is like, where do you want to go if you want to learn English? What are you using your English for? If you're using it to
Hmm.
travel, that's different than business. Most of the
Yeah.
foundation is the same, but let's not waste any time talking about tourist destinations if you're going to be using it professionally as an engineer.
Hmm.
Let's talk about how to do that. You don't know the destination, don't expect to get there. Okay, next one is, what are the most significant challenges you face in transforming workplace culture and leadership, either in your own organization or that of your clients?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is when a leader comes to me and says, I want to transform my organization. And then I suggest the kinds of things that they should be doing, starting with envisioning the future, of course, like we just talked about. And then they pretty much do everything opposite. They don't embrace it. They don't allow the people in their organization to experiment with different kinds of culture, which is a process, right? To get to a transformational culture, you probably will have some missteps along the way, and that's okay. I mean, that's part of learning, that's part of growing. But I see that a lot of leaders will just give it sort of lip service and say, yes, this is the trendy thing to do. I want this kind of a culture. But when push comes to shove, they're not really willing to do the things that they need to do as leaders to model the kind of culture that they say they want. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And obviously, that's not everybody. I've worked with some folks who are phenomenal leaders who just, jump right in and embrace it and walk the talk immediately. But unfortunately, there are some who will just say it to say it and think that that's the thing to do or the right thing to do, or it's in line with something going on, high at a higher up level, but they're not willing to actually make the changes.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Some of the other interviews I've done, we talked about that, buy-in on all levels. And that's the other thing is like, okay, look, Allison, I'm working with a bunch of idiots. Can you fix them? Because I don't need anything.
Right.
I'm
Yeah,
perfect.
exactly.
Now let's go from here. It's like, well, and the person I was interviewing said something I loved. It was like, I've only had to fire 5 or 6 of my clients because it was
Mm,
like, if you want me to be the CEO, if you don't want to be in the room to do this, it's probably going to fail. And there's lots of research behind that, right? That famous I can't remember that one of the biggest companies in the world, the biggest consulting agency in the world, is famous for saying 80% of change efforts will fail. And it's almost
mhm.
always because of lack of management buy-in or lack of buy-in across any part of the organization that's going to be involved in it, which is pretty much everybody. So
Right.
I hear you there. Next one is, could you describe a recent situation where you felt that a leader, this is ironic in this case, could have benefited from additional training or guidance in culture building, leadership, or both?
Well, I mean, not to out anybody here, but I definitely had a situation with a government agency. I do a lot of work, and I won't name the agency, but
Of course
I do a
not.
lot of work with the federal government here, being in
Mhm.
Washington, D.C. And what happens sometimes in the government is there are political appointees who come in to an organization. And it can be very abrupt sometimes. And there've been a few examples where I've worked with different departments where somebody's come in who's been appointed, and it's either not a great fit, or they're not, more so they're not willing to really understand what's been going on in the organization, to learn the current culture, and they come in with a lot of great ideas, but they don't take the time to really understand what's going on within the agency, what the culture is, what it would take if you wanted to shift the culture. So I can definitely think of a few examples of folks I've worked with. I've worked with people within the agency who've had someone come in at the highest level that wants to shake everything up, but doesn't really take the time to meet people, to learn about the organization, to learn about people and culture, and things like that. And that usually ends up in a lot of discord. And, the leader might say something like you said before about, all these people that below me that need fixing, where in reality, I think if the leader had had a little bit more coaching, perhaps when they first come in, to be able to kind of see the big picture and understand it more personally, and then sort of start to roll out their initiatives. But I think there's that gap sometimes where there's just a lack of really wanting to understand before implementing some sort of change in the process or the culture. And I've certainly seen that firsthand.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, the next one. What specific outcomes would you hope to achieve through training in leadership and culture building?
Well, it's going to depend a lot on who I'm training, and what they're looking for sure. I think that for leaders, one of the outcomes that I would look for would be for them to know their organization better. Like I just talked about, I think, a lot of leaders are running so fast. There's so many fires to put out, but allowing them the time to think more strategically, really get to understand the organization, the people that they work with, kind of get in there a little bit, and then be able to take it up and think strategically about what's going to happen next. So I think sometimes one or the other part is missing, and so sort of an outcome would be more of a cohesion, a cohesive look at what's going on in your organization, and just the ability to work with others to see it.
Hmm. Excellent. Okay, the next one. In your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders should possess to create a thriving organizational culture?
Empathy, vulnerability, and trust.
Nice, concise. And it makes sense. Actually, I had a meeting today with one of my bosses that I'm working with, and it was very interesting because it's like it's English, because that was, as we discussed outside of this, that is part of my my visa status. I have to have a certain amount of work coming directly from Japan if I
Mhm.
want to stay. But it was all about this kind of thing. He's like, look, Tim, in terms of your own consulting practice, I'm already a consultant expanding my business, but also in consulting, and I'm going to help you get there. It's like, I'm going to help you get out of my organization to do what you want to do to succeed. And it's like, I love you. You're such a great guy. Like, literally, it was like, even when we were negotiating the whole position, it was like, I recognize, Tim, you're probably going to be gone in 12 to 18 months. I see what's happening with you on LinkedIn and other things. But he's like, that's totally fine. We're both on the same page, and we could still both win short term, as I need somebody to do what you do, and long term, just as a relationship that we want anyway, far into the future, where we can tap into each other's resources. So that's awesome. Next one is, what do you think is the ideal duration for a comprehensive course on transforming workplace culture, leadership, or both?
Years? I mean, that's a tough question because, you think about how long it would take to transform a culture. I mean, it literally can take years. Of course, you're not going to have a course that takes years. But I think what you would want to do is to have a series of courses, a series of not courses, that's not really the right word, learning opportunities and learning to practice opportunities where you get to put things into practice. So it's more of a, let's say it's a year-long program and maybe there's 4 sessions, quarterly sessions, and then there's periodic check-ins in between the sessions. Something like that works a lot better than saying, okay, I'm going to send you here for a week and you're going to learn everything there is to know about transforming your culture. Because you're not going to be able to take that all away. People don't remember once they leave, the conference or whatever it might be. A lot goes out of their brain. It's 80/20. Once again, they maybe retain about 20% of it, if they're lucky. And there's also this, talk about neuroscience. There's also the concept of overload and overwhelm. And when you throw too much at people all at once, their brains are going to go into fight or flight, and they're just not going to be able to process it thinking rationally. So I think the better approach is to set something up. Maybe it's some sort of cohort program that would last a longer duration, perhaps a year, with specific touch points, maybe workshops, like I said, quarterly or so, with other touch points and coaching in between, to actually put it into action. That's what I think would be ideal in a situation like that.
Right. Agreed. I mean, it really comes down to, when you talk about that and you talk about the neuroscience of learning in general, it's ridiculous to say, here's a bunch of stuff, remember it, unless they're using spaced repetition and actually applying this stuff. Even when I'm doing English, I literally have a list of stuff. It's like, the English we're going to talk about is going to be, it should be frequent, it should be relevant, it should be applicable, it should be meaningful. Like, I literally have a checklist of stuff, and it's like,
Mhm.
if this doesn't have anything to do with your life, why on earth are we talking about it? Because it's
Mhm.
not going to stick. And absolutely, if there isn't a chance to absorb some information and then apply it in a real situation, most of it's like, I took a course and now I'm going back to
Right,
work and I'm never going to do any of this ever again.
right, exactly.
Mhm. Next one, what factors would influence your decision about that ideal duration? So this references back to the question you just answered.
Mm,
So
mhm,
what things would sort of tweak that sort of duration that you talked about, either up or down, sideways, whatever it is?
mm. Well, I know that there's a lot of organizations that would say, I don't have that much time. I want to do it in a shorter amount of time. I probably try to caution against that because something like culture change takes a long time, and I don't think people realize how long it can take. Now, if it's more about improving leadership and not so much, changing an entire culture, I think it can be slimmed down. But I think it just depends on, again, let's go back to what's that endpoint that you want to accomplish. I would need to really understand, and they would really need to understand, what do you want out of this? Are we really trying to change the entire culture of this entire organization? Or are you just trying to get some of your leaders to, maybe have more empathy or be more vulnerable or build trust, right? And I think understanding what their endpoint is and what they're going for would help inform the duration. If you're looking for full-blown culture change, we should really be thinking about something that spans 6 months at least. And if you're thinking of something that's more of I just want to help my leaders, get more comfortable with being vulnerable, let's just say, I think we could accomplish that in a couple of courses, a couple of touch points, maybe over the course of a month or two. I think it just really depends on what that desired outcome is.
Right. Well, as you were speaking, I was thinking a little bit too about when you were talking about, leadership could be trimmed down. Certainly there's leadership training, which doesn't necessarily need to involve culture change, but I would say the reverse direction can't really be disentangled. Unless
Hmm.
the leader is part of that culture change, it's
Yep.
simply not going to happen. It's going to be
Yeah,
defeated. So
absolutely.
it's sort of like saying, well, I just want to take care of my mind, but not my body.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to exercise, but I want a sharp mind. It's like if you looked at the recommendations from neuroscience about what you should do on the physical side, on the body side, it's like, first of all, remember that that's a false dichotomy. Your brain is an organ in your body. So healthy fats, lots of veggies, sleep. I've
Hmm.
finished listening to this amazing book about that, but I mean, it's just like people would be going, no, 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 you're talking about what I should do at the gym. It's like, well, the
Well, it's
gym,
holistic.
yeah, that whole thing, your brain needs that too. It isn't
Hmm.
separate. So everything you want to do to make your body healthy is also what is recommended to make your brain healthy. So can't
Yeah.
separate some things. So
Yeah, and
next one
and I
is,
agree 100%. If you're looking for culture change, it's not a couple of leadership workshops. The leaders need to be fully on board, and you might need to do a few workshops with the leaders first to get them prepped for it, and then do some, real culture change type things. But I 100% agree. I mean, you can't have culture change without strong leadership.
yeah. Next one is, which formats or delivery methods would you say would be the most effective for the kind of training we're talking about?
Well, we've opened up the door to a lot of different opportunities, like here we are on Zoom. I still believe that there is significant value in person. And so what I would propose would be, let's go back to that idea of a year-long cohort, and there's 4 workshops quarterly. I would propose that those workshops be in person to the extent possible. If they can't be in person, I would recommend that they be virtual rather than hybrid, because I found that what happens in hybrid is that people get sort of uneven say and uneven attention, and even the best facilitator in the world, it's a challenge. It's a real challenge to have some people coming in on a Zoom, some people in the room. It really makes it difficult for both sides. So I would say, if you can't do it in person, which I would highly recommend for, the larger workshop type sessions, then you could do it virtually. And then the in betweens, the coaching type things, or a pulse check or whatever it might be that you would have in between, that can be virtual. You don't have to bring people together for that, but that would be more of a virtual check-in.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, we're human beings, and the way we evolved wasn't to look at a flat screen. Like, it's a weird thing when you think about it. It was like, I've literally thought about putting a set of eyes in front of or on the outside flanking my camera so that when I'm looking there. But
Hmm.
for my brain, you're down there. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm looking at your eyes right now, but that isn't what you feel. So even just those
Right.
kind of things, the fact that you're seeing me from, you know, barely above my shoulders, like we're doing like
Yeah,
6 inches, 8 inches between my shoulders and my chest. It was like, what's going on with the rest of my body? Which, of course, there's a lot of research on that, nonverbal communication,
of
and
course. Yeah.
also how people behave in person with people is different than how people behave in their own completely controlled environment. So yeah, there's the world of good reasons for that. I agree with you about that. Virtual has its benefits, but it definitely has its limitations. Okay, what would you look for in a training to make it more or less valuable? Put it this way, in terms of the benefit
Okay.
it gives. Yes.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I would definitely look for a training that has some sort of a follow-up, not just a one and done. So, if there's a training session and then there's a couple of weeks later a check-in or something like that. I personally, since I know about training and I know what helps and what helps make training stick. Now, would your average corporate leader think that way? I'm not sure, but for me, I would absolutely look for, are there tools provided in this training? Are they going to provide something that I can take away? Whether it's a couple of different really good tactics that I can use, they give me examples of what I can use in my day-to-day work, whether it's some sort of a workbook that I can write things down in and bring it back with me, or whether maybe it's an accountability partner that I get assigned afterwards, but some sort of, some way to make it stick and some way to follow up to ensure that it's actually sticking. I think for me, that would be the most valuable, because otherwise it's just, people go to training and then, like we said, they forget.
Right. I want to share something with you because it also happens to be in another tab, but is completely relevant. Here's the thing I fire off to even just my English clients, that these are online lessons or through
Hmm.
a phone app. I tell them, to be able to do what you want to do and be successful at it, it must be frequent. Once a week is not enough when you're talking about language change, but it's
Yeah.
frequent, challenging, engaging, applicable, meaningful, relevant, repetition with immediate expert feedback or objective feedback. So this is essentially deliberate practice as defined
Hmm.
by K. Anders Ericsson. And it's like all these things is a mashup of my own experience teaching, uh, including C-suite executives and 2-year-old kids, that if these things aren't there, it probably isn't going to work. And anything that goes against it is like Hebb's law, neurons that fire together, wire together. It isn't neurons that fire together once a week or month wire together, because
Hmm.
that isn't the way it works. That's not the way your brain works. So anyway,
Right.
that was just sort of relevant. I thought I
No, and
want to
I
share it.
I can tell you that firsthand because as an adult, it's harder to learn new things as an adult, of course. And I watch my kids and I see what they can pick up really quickly. But for me, obviously, it can be a little like a new skill or a new language. And I've been trying to learn the guitar for quite some time now, but my days are so busy that I don't get to practice every day. And I find that if a couple of days go by and I haven't practiced, like how do I do that chord again?
Mhm.
I have to look it up. I have to actually look it up because it's not embedded in my brain. If I find the time to just get even 10 minutes each day, it gets more cemented. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I tell people about language is like, in your native language, how often do you practice? And I get one of two answers. I either get every day or never. And it's like,
Hmm.
really? You're not actually speaking, listening, and producing language? Well, I do that every day. It's like, that's practice.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting. And another thing I think is true too, which I see, one of the great things about teaching young kids is they don't have our baggage. By and
Right.
large, adults are much better and more experienced learners, but they don't care about what other people think yet. They aren't being tough on
Hmm.
themselves. So mostly for adults, I think it's mindset and baggage, and we all have it, regardless of
Hmm.
what it is. That is our main handicap, not our ability, but
Right.
all the stuff with gums that comes from being a more experienced human being. Next
Makes
one.
sense.
Yeah. Can you share your thoughts on the frequency of coaching sessions, weekly, twice a week, twice a month, monthly, whatever it happens to be that would align best with your needs or those of your clients?
Oh, again, it depends what they want. It depends what the outcome is. But I typically weekly works really well. I think, sometimes if there's a situation that they're dealing with and it's very pressing, you could do twice a week. And I think once a month is like we just talked about, I mean, it's really not enough to make anything stick. So I would say weekly is best. But every other week isn't too terrible. That's not bad either. And then if you're in a certain situation that you need like extra coaching to go through, then you could do more than once a week. But I think a weekly cadence is probably your best bet.
Right. I like that. And it was interesting when you were talking about every 2 weeks. One of the things again, mostly about warning for my language students, but it's like one of the problems with every 2 weeks is our lives, at least
Yeah.
mine, is on cadence is like Friday I do this, Wednesday I do this. And if
Mm,
every second week it's like do this, don't do this, it's a habit breaking pattern, which
mm,
is sort of
mhm,
compromising the formation of the habit of doing that thing. So that's why it's sort of like every single day, or at least every single weekday, or every week, same time, same place, gets rid of some of that cognitive load for you. It's one less thing you have to think about while you're busy filling your brain with all sorts of new knowledge. So yeah, I think that's another thing that's
mhm.
a variable. Next one is, and this is kind of 3 parts or 2 parts, depending how you count it, and that is which types of support or mentorship outside of the scheduled trainings would be most beneficial?
Which types, in terms of what do you mean exactly?
Right. So, okay. So, for example, you have your regular cadence we just talked about. So, you're
Right.
doing your once a week sessions, whatever that is, whether that's with a group or an individual.
Hmm.
But, you do that on Friday, and on Monday morning, they're like, I'm really stuck. I need Allison to help me
Mm,
with this. But now I got to wait a week. And talking about what we just talked about is like, that's not an ideal situation, especially since our
right.
brain associates what just happened most strongly with its reinforcement or its result fractions of seconds later to make
Hmm.
the strongest association. So in that case, where they need that between regular
Mm.
session support, what form would be most beneficial?
I think in an ideal situation, if I were to come in and work with an organization and do sort of this, let's just stick with this year-long program idea with the 4 sessions and the coaching every week, or maybe every other week, but probably every week. But then something comes up with somebody and they need to reach me sooner. I think, establishing from the beginning how and when they can reach me, and making that available, having some flexibility within this contract to be able to do the kinds of things if someone needs to talk to me sooner than their coaching session, finding a way for them to get in touch with me. What, is there a designated email that they should use, or should they just use my regular email, or should they just go to my Calendly link and pick a time? What, setting up that protocol for if they need extra help, what can they do to get that extra help? Because I think it's important that if they're identifying in themselves that they need more help, they should be able to get it. Otherwise, the culture change that we're looking for is, is at risk.
Right. And but that also I like that because that reinforces the whole idea. It was like you're embracing the necessity for change. You're
Yeah.
recognizing that you need this additional support. It's sort of like saying good dog and then slapping the dog on the snout for actually coming to do what you've asked it to do, whether
Hmm.
that's a person or an animal. So you actually answer the next question in a sense,
Oh,
but I'll ask it anyway in case you have other things to add. That was the second part is ideally how often should that be available? So what you just talked about, which I think of almost like office hours, that it was like,
yeah.
here's the classes, but I'm available at this time during these days if you need it, but
Right.
otherwise I need to be available to help those who do. So this one is, so ideally, we're talking fairy tale world.
Hmm.
What would be the ideal availability for this additional support?
Well, I mean, assuming I didn't have any other clients, you know.
Exactly. That's what
No,
I'm
but
asking.
yeah, I mean, I like the idea of having this office hours, and I think, maybe it's maybe if the coaching sessions all occur on a certain day of the week, let's say the coaching sessions occur on Wednesdays, and I don't know if everyone could be coached on Wednesday, depending on how many people, how many leaders we're talking about. Or let's say the coaching sessions are, I have Monday, Wednesday, Friday available for coaching. Then I would say
Mhm,
I'd have office hours on, Tuesday and Thursday for, for a certain portion of the day, maybe for 2 hours or something like that, where people
mhm.
could contact me. I'd have to weigh it against what else I'm doing and what other clients I have and what their needs are. But I think if you offered it maybe, twice during the week in 2 hour blocks or something like that, I think that would be plenty.
Okay. So I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate. You don't have any other clients. You have one client, they're perfect. That is literally you're available to do work for them because they're the one client you have. They're fantastic. You love them. Literally, it's the fairy tale situation.
Hmm.
What in that case would be the ideal is like you literally have no limit to your resources, your time, your ability to reach them, everything else. What in that perfect fantasy universe would be ideal for what we're talking about here?
Well, ideal, perfect fantasy would be just they can access me, uh, no, I don't want to say at all times. I don't want them, accessing me at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, but I'd say during regular business hours, anytime that I'm not doing something else with the organization. If I'm not doing a training with them or a coaching, and they need me, they just get my Calendly link and they pick a time that works for them.
Right. Okay.
I mean, that
And the
would be
last,
ideal.
that would be ideal. And that's why I qualified this out because it's like ideal isn't the logistical real world, which you've already, referenced. So now here's the other side of this same coin, and that is realistically, how often would be practical and sustainable rather than
Right. And
perfect world fantasy.
that was more like what we were talking about as far as, maybe twice a week for a few hours. I'm getting a weird glare here now all of a sudden. The sun changed. But yeah, I think something like an office hours on the off days from when I'm doing coaching, a couple hours, maybe 2 days a week, something like that would probably be the most feasible and sustainable.
Right. How do you envision the course that is what we've talked about? Let's refer to it as a course, uh, helping helping you address specific cultural or leadership challenges within your organization or those of your clients.
Well, when we say the course, are we talking about the whole package here? Let me see if I can adjust
Yeah,
my.
the 1 year course we've been talking about, the 1 year training, whatever you want to call it, that
Right.
thing that has preceded this question, that's what I'm
Hmm.
referencing.
Yeah. Well, how do I see it benefiting them?
How do you envision it? Yeah, basically addressing the specific cultural and leadership challenges they might have.
Right. Well, again, we got to go back to what are those specific challenges and probably set some sort of benchmark in the beginning, do some sort of where are we now? What's the pulse now? And coming, to the end of the year, or not the end of the year, probably after every quarter, because we're going to have these
Mhm,
sessions every quarter, doing some sort of an assessment to see where people are. I could probably do a little mini leadership assessment with everybody, every quarter to kind of get that pulse check and compare it to where we've been and then adjust as necessary. Because if we
mhm.
get through 2 quarters and there's not a lot of movement, then we need to do something different.
Right. Measurables and end results.
Hmm.
Okay, so the next one, and we're almost done here, so we're making great time. Considering the potential impact on your organization or those of your clients, what pricing model, one time, monthly, quarterly, subscription, yearly, whatever, do you think would be most appealing for this kind of training?
Appealing for me or appealing for my clients?
Um, both,
Yeah.
if you have the bravery to answer it.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I'd want to think more on that, but I do a lot of customized package processing or pricing
Hmm.
rather, not processing. You know, back in my consulting days at Deloitte, it was all by the hour. And there are some clients that I have who still want to be billed by the hour. In this case, it would absolutely not be an hourly type of a situation. It would have to be more of a package, maybe even a retainer kind of an arrangement. But I
Hmm.
would I would price out, 4 workshops and weekly coaching with X number of people, and give them a number, and then maybe there's some add-ons that if they need that additional time, that office hours, maybe that adds on an hourly rate or something like that. But I think by and large, the client would appreciate having, at least I believe, based on my experience, the client would appreciate having a package. They would appreciate having a package that includes everything to the extent possible. And then, maybe there's a few a la cartes in there that if they decide to use, they can use. But and that works for me too. I mean, from a billing perspective, and you just know that, hey, this is the client and this is what I'm doing for them and this is how much. And the only downside to something like that is potential sticker shock, because if you're looking at a full year program.
Hmm.
But what I do with a lot of my clients is, I don't bill them for the whole program all at once. We're billing them on a monthly basis, a quarterly basis, whatever they want, I can
Hmm.
do. So,
Hmm.
that usually split it up or by milestones, and that seems to work really well.
Right. Okay, so now let's flip the script. You're the client. You're looking for this kind of thing. What would be best for you in terms of that, right? Because as you
Hmm.
said, you'll
Oh
give them
yeah.
whatever they want, but now you're the person paying. What do
Hmm.
you want to pay? A one-time payment, a one and done, a monthly, a quarterly? How would you like to pay if you were the buyer?
Well, again, I think that if I were the buyer, I'd want to see, what's the cost for all of this altogether. Not pay it all at once. I'd want to pay it in installments, but I would want to get a package price for the whole thing. So that way I
Right.
don't have to worry about, this is just going to go on autopilot, and my consultant's going to do what they need to do, and we don't have to keep doing contract modifications or anything like that. We have this
Hmm.
package deal, and maybe I'm paying, monthly or quarterly, based on what that total package is. But I think that based on my experience with my clients, that tends to be what they like.
Right. Okay, but it's not your clients, it's you.
Well, I mean,
What?
for me, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's what I would like as well,
Okay, okay. That
as if
answers the
I were
last
the
part of the
client. Yeah.
question. Right. Okay.
Hmm.
So now this is more self-surfing, but it's also social proof. I may include some of this. Something I forgot to do before, and it's silly, but it's also important. It's totally okay with you, I assume, since you're letting me record this, that I share this in whole and part on social media, because of course
Hmm.
that's part of it. Um,
Right.
who do you know who could benefit from or be willing to be interviewed by me on this exact topic? That is, be you.
Yeah.
um, right? So I'm of course always looking for interviewees.
Sure. Sure. I will have to get back to you on that one. I'd have to think
Sure,
about it a little bit and send you a note.
no problem. That's totally okay. And on any of these questions, if you have later reference, I would love to hear
Mhm.
back from you because I'm not looking for praise. I'm looking for knowledge and insight from other people. I
Sure.
know about group genius. It's a core part of my work. Okay, so then the next one is uh the flipped script of what I just said. Who do you know who may be looking for guests about these topics for their podcasts or summit or whatever, where I'm the guest? So
Ah,
you're me
yeah,
and
I'd
I'm
have to
you.
think about that one too. That's a
No
good one
problem.
for Jenny and Steve,
Hmm.
the speaker connections group.
Yeah.
My circles are, I have a pretty strong network, and I know a lot of other consultants and people who have their own small businesses. I will say that I'm starting to get more plugged in to people who have podcasts, but that's not, a lot of the people I know who have podcasts aren't individuals, but they're organizations. So, for instance, the Association for Talent Development, I was on one of their podcasts. SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, I was on one of
Mm-hmm.
their podcasts. So those are more organizational podcasts, and I'm just starting to get to know some other podcasters.
Right. But I mean, that's the thing too. Like, one of the reasons I see that as being such powerful social proof is if you're recommending people to me, and
Mhm,
and if you don't, that's totally okay. To me, it's so important that I respect my network, and I'm not just trying to foist and give junk mail to people. They can get that anywhere. That it is a real, if I point you to somebody, I also want to know from my network is like, was this person a valuable person, or did they just try to sell you their crap right away? Or were they interested in building relationships, exchanging value, that kind of stuff? And if not, I'll kick people out of my, that's probably, lots of people have tens of thousands. It's like, yeah, but how many of those people do you know? Are they proudly LinkedIn open networkers, which is just code for spammers? It's
mhm,
not what I want in my network. So
exactly.
the very last one, and thank you for being kick-ass at doing this, and that is, how could I make this interview better?
Well, that's a good question. Well, you gotta rewrite some of those questions first, Tim.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I think for me personally, I don't need the questions in advance, but I think maybe a little more context in advance might help. I wasn't exactly sure where we were going with the interview. So just maybe a little bit more in advance of, what kinds of things that we're going to be talking about might be helpful.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the free flow as well, that, it's more like a conversation and less of, I wouldn't want to come on here and be rehearsed with all the questions. That would sound fake.
Yes.
So I
And
think
that's
I
why
like
I
that.
didn't
I
want to
like
do
that
it.
about it. And I think maybe just a little more upfront context, and yeah, that would probably be helpful.
Excellent. That's wonderful and great feedback for me. Thank you so much. We are absolutely done now. Um, I will send you, or please send me things like, if you want something other than a clip from here, a thumbnail, hashtags, links of ways to contact you, all that kind of stuff, so that when I do post it, that's going to be posted in the description. And
Okay.
I post it wholly on YouTube and wholly on Facebook. That is the entire
Okay.
interview. And then I chop it into questions, and then I repost those questions daily on both of those, plus LinkedIn, because it's then under that 15-minute limit. And of course, it's going to be weeks or maybe even months before I actually get it up. But of course, I'm going to reach back and give you that information in those links, should you want to engage or not, but at least let
Hmm.
you see the final product if you choose.
I would very much like to see the final product, and I would be happy to share it as well. One thing that occurred to me when we were talking about, who I might know that might be a good guest, I think showing them what I did, when I think of people that might want to do it, I would love to be able to show them this is what it's like. Maybe it's not the whole thing, that'd probably
Mm-hmm.
be too long for them, but maybe, a question or two, and say, this is what it's like, and I think you'd be good for this, and give them a little bit of a sense of what it is, and then I can start connecting you with people.
Well, and that would add the context you were referring to. It's like,
Exactly.
so thank
Hmm.
you so much. Have a wonderful day. And I got something coming up myself soon in 7 minutes. So take care.
All
Thank you so
right.
much, Allison. Bye bye.
Bye bye.